Do you need a bonus ESL lesson? Or maybe you just need an activity where students can communicate with each other and have fun doing it? I got you. Today I'll share my ESL storytelling activity. This can be a full lesson plan, or it can be an activity that you just add to your lesson. My name is Megan. I have been an ESL teacher in China for the past 10 years, and I make videos all about lesson plan ideas, advice for teachers, and all things teaching ESL. Let's just jump into this lesson plan structure. Like I said, this can be a full lesson plan, or this can be an activity that you just add in. What is it? How does it work? How can you use it in your classroom? Well, the idea is super simple. Just give students pictures and have students create a story based on those pictures. First, you'll want to divide the class up into about groups of 4. Now you can definitely go less. You can have 2 or 3 people in each group. I found that more than 4 though doesn't work very well because you want everyone to have a chance to really communicate to the discussion. After everyone has been divided up, give each group a set of pictures. Now you can do this in a variety of ways, whatever works best with your classroom. The way I love to do this is give students laminated pictures. So my first year of teaching, one of my friends actually gave me these laminated pictures, and to be honest, these are just calendars. If you flip it over, you can see the calendar chart. And so my friend had just printed out a ton of pictures that came from calendars and gave them to me. Now I love using these because it's really fun to pass these around to the students. The students love being able to hold them. It feels more like a legitimate project that they are working on. If you don't have access to something like this, you could always print out your own pictures and laminate them. I've done that several times myself. If this isn't an option, you can always put pictures on the PowerPoint screen. If that's not an option, another thing that I have personally done is just write out descriptions of the pictures on pieces of paper. I don't always have a computer. I don't always have electricity in my classroom. I don't always have materials that I need. So really you can do this in any way you want. Now let's talk about the pictures you can choose for a minute. These are the pictures that I used in my original lesson plan, and I'm an experimenter. So once this worked well, I tried to do it with other things as well. Let me give you some advice about what pictures to choose. For me personally, I love to choose something with a castle. This just lends itself to really interesting discussions. You know, students see a castle and their mind immediately goes to fairy tales, and that's a really fun and easy story structure to create. It's really easy for students to get an idea when they see something like a castle. So I like to choose a location. You could do other locations though as well. Just make sure they're interesting. You know, maybe it's a haunted house, or it's a cabin in the woods, or it's Disneyland. If you choose something really boring like a classroom or a shopping mall, the story just might not be as exciting. Then I like to give students a picture of an animal, so maybe a monkey or a panda or a puppy. Having animals in the story just makes the story really fun and really cute. The last set is definitely a wild card. Now I only had these because my friend had gifted me this calendar that was frogs in interesting situations. So they have a picture of a frog wearing a crown or a frog inside a shoe. And this actually worked out so well because when you see a castle, a monkey, and a frog wearing a crown, you can't not write a fairy tale. Like, it leans very heavily towards a fairy tale. But if you don't happen to have a calendar with frogs doing weird things hanging around, you can always substitute this for something else. Like I said, you could print out pictures. Another thing I really enjoy doing is making this option a famous person. Maybe it's a celebrity, or maybe it's someone like Barack Obama or Jackie Chan. Adding a famous person into the story just makes it a little bit more entertaining. Something you could do is give different pictures to each group. I know that's a lot of pictures though. So if you don't want to give different pictures to each group, you could have some things be the same. For example, you put a picture of this castle on the PowerPoint and tell everyone that a castle is the picture. Like everyone is going to have the same location. Then maybe you could hand out a picture with Obama or a picture with a monkey and change up those other two or the other one picture just to add a little bit of variety. You don't have to change any of the pictures though. If you wanted, you could give all the students the same set of pictures and watch them be creative and create different stories even though they have the same picture. In my experience, I have found that it's a little bit more interesting when each group has slightly different pictures. Even if they're all having the same location, they all have a castle, just having different animals or different people makes the stories much more interesting. One last tip about pictures is I would not give more than 3. I've found that if there are just 2 pictures, students don't seem to be that inspired with ideas, and if there are more than 3 pictures, then they're kind of bogged down by all of the information that they have to add in. So I found that 3 is the perfect number. So step number 2 is passing out your pictures or showing the students what their pictures are. Their task for number 3 is to create a story implementing each of the pictures that they have been given. So if they have a castle, their characters have to go to a castle. If Jackie Chan is their person, then at some point Jackie Chan needs to show up in the story. Give students plenty of time to create their stories. Now, how much time your students will need will really depend on them. Higher level students sometimes work a little bit faster because they have a better mastery of English, but sometimes they tend to lean towards more complex stories that takes a little bit more time to figure out. Lower level students might need more time to actually figure out the English part of it, but they might choose a really simple story. Everything is dependent on your students. My advice is to allot about 10 to 15 minutes. I've usually found that's good. Walk around the room though. Be talking with students, answering their questions. If they get stuck on one part of the story, maybe you can give them advice. Now, what are students learning and what are they doing during this time? Well, hopefully they're discussing in English, they're using their creativity, but they're also focusing on explaining their ideas in a clear and coherent way. I've often found that sometimes it's difficult for students to tell stories because that's not what they're used to practicing in English. They're often used to making dialogues and making conversations. Things like, how are you? I'm good. How are you? Oh, it's great weather today. They're used to constantly having this back and forth rather than having to explain a concept from their own brain. So they're really focused on being organized, being clear, making sure they didn't omit any necessary information. They're also practicing their verb tense as well. This is something that students get tripped up on a lot. And so if you're telling a story, this is going to all be in past tense. So as students are writing, remind them to make sure, double check that all of your verbs are in past tense. Another thing they can be working on is adjectives. I've found that adjectives are often a pain point for my students. A lot of textbooks don't focus on them and they have very limited vocabulary base to work with. So maybe this is the focus of your lesson, is having more complex or higher level vocabulary words regarding adjectives. You know, when the students see the castle, they have to describe the setting. They have to describe the animal. They have to describe how the characters are feeling. If you want, you could give students that specific focus. Give them a challenge. They have to use 5 words to describe the scenery. They have to use 5 adjectives to describe how the characters are feeling. You could also give other challenges too, where students have to use the vocabulary words that you taught during that lesson. Speaking of vocabulary words, do you need to teach vocabulary for this lesson specifically? No, you don't have to. Often I don't, but sometimes I do, and I will just give them the vocabulary words that I think will be very helpful for them in creating the story. For example, most students don't know the English word castle, and they certainly make a mistake in pronouncing it. They will often say castle instead of saying castle. So maybe the vocabulary word is castle. If you have a witch, maybe the vocabulary word is witch. Maybe the vocabulary word is princess. Maybe the vocabulary word is adventure. Maybe the vocabulary word is fairy tale. You could use vocabulary words that are connected to the types of stories your students are probably going to be creating. Or you can also challenge the students to find their own vocabulary words. As they're discussing with their teammates, they're going to stumble across verbs, adjectives, nouns that they don't know how to say in English. Encourage them to use their phones, to use their dictionaries, to search new words that they're able to use in their story. So while students are working on their story, walk around, help them a little bit, encourage them with vocabulary. Then we're going to step number 4, which is the presentation. After students have made their story, I give them a chance to share their story with others. Now you can do this in a variety of ways. You could have a group come to the front of the room and present their story to everyone. Often when I do this, students will take up their pictures, and one student will hold the castle, and another student will hold a monkey, and another student will hold a person, and it's really enjoyable. Everyone else gets to see the pictures that they got, which if one group's pictures are very different from another group's, it makes it really interesting to watch, and they have to explain their story in English. This is usually so much fun because with these types of stories, they're very fun, they're very whimsical. So students are laughing, they're enjoying the chaos and the creativity that's coming out. If you don't want students to come to the front of the room, or you want to give more students the opportunity to practice if you have less time, have students share with each other in different groups. So have group number 1 share their story with group number 2, then group number 2 shares their story with group number 1. That way you have multiple groups practicing all at the same time. Quick tip for this, if you're going to do it this way, set up the groups beforehand. So I've found that a group with a square shape usually works a lot better than a rectangular shape. So let's say we have all the students sitting in the rows of the classroom. Rather than making the entire first row a team, the second row a team, because that's a little bit difficult for them all to communicate together. Instead, take these 2 students from this row and these 2 students from the row behind them and create a square shape. These 4 students are together and these 4 students are together. It makes communication much easier. But of course, this all depends on what your classroom is like. So you can have students come to the front and share in front of everyone. You can have group number 1 share with group number 2. Another thing you can do is you could have this be an entire lesson or activity for the next class. And often I find students like to do this because they have a little bit more time to prepare and get more familiar with their story. So for homework, maybe they have to get ready to share their story next time. So hopefully this will give you some ideas for a really fun activity to do with your students. This is one of the activities that I keep going back to time and time and time again. And honestly, it has never failed me. Students have always really enjoyed it. They enjoy the chance to actually use English. They're actually using English when they discuss. They're looking up new vocabulary words. They're sharing a story in English, which most of them haven't done in such a way. They enjoy the creativity and the fun of it. So if you want to try it, definitely go for it. I hope it goes well with your lessons. If you ever have any questions, you can always send me a message on Instagram at atlasteaching. Leave a comment in the comment section down below. And you can also check back here for weekly videos all about teaching ESL. Okay, that's all for today. Have fun with your stories. Bye.